So, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So, the topic that I would try and delve upon is Naam. And before I start, I just wanted to say that I have participated in a couple of sessions on Naam and heard the others offline. And it's really been very humbling to listen to them to the extent that I really felt dispensable today, at least in terms of what to say and at the loss of words. Uh, so I have just made an attempt to take a slightly different approach on trying to delve upon this topic by trying to relate to some of the recent experiences in my life and how they kind of help me relate to the concept of Naam as it comes through to us in Gurbani and in experiential manner, if you may call it. So to begin with, I would just like to put this up as a kind of a disclaimer that I'm not trying to define anything, trying to capture the unknowable in theories and formalized doctrines is like trying to catch the wind in a butterfly net. If this is something, if it is there in the back of our mind, and we are still exploring and seeking what Naam is or what the truth is, I have personally felt that it makes things all the more easier and it helps us let go of our anxiousness to reach somewhere, which really becomes very counterproductive at times, if you will, to decipher what we are trying to decipher. If I may attempt to put one line for Naam, what comes to my mind, it is the intuition of the one, an intuition which is constant and infallible. It may not be a conceptualization or a definition or anything of that sort, but something which is very natural, very sahje, सहज सुभाए जिसमें ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ of the one. That is what is important when we read Gurbani. It's talking about the one. And it is constant, it is not momentary, it is not when I'm reading Gurbani or when I'm reminding myself of the subject or when I'm doing Naam Japna in a very, you know, a traditional fashion or as Gurbani reveals it differently to different people. But it is a very constant, unforced, and an intuition which I don't really try to happen. So we have seen through Gurbani, as all of the presenters have very beautifully captured, um, you know, Ravinder Veerji talking about the different facets of Naam that come, that he can relate to. Ekankar ji talking about the linguistic aspects of it. Last week, Ripudaman Veerji really sharing a lot of aspects of Naam, and I really love the story that he shared. So there seems to be a common thread which comes across from Gurbani, that understanding Naam is a process that may happen through understanding of the Shabad. But then understanding of the Shabad kind of has two dimensions to it, two realms to it. One is just, acquiring cursory gyan or knowledge to know about something. And then it is the eureka or aha or the intuition moment, ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਾਣਨਾ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਬੁੱਝਣਾ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ, ਸ਼ਬਦ ਬੁੱਝਣਾ, which is knowing the truth. So here, this I find very interesting for myself, that these two terms, that knowing about something and knowing something, there is a quantum leap from one to the other, and the two are very, very different. And we may experience this not just when we are talking about Naam or truth or the Jyot or any other concepts, but very frequently in our daily lives. I don't know Naam. I may or may not know Naam. I don't know about that. All I know is the difference on this concept of knowing about and knowing. We experience this for different things in our daily lives, and maybe delving into that would help us throw some light. So knowing about versus knowing, I feel it is like the knowing about is what science is to us or what human intellect is to us. And when science and human intellect comes in, there is a lot of doing to it. There is a lot of effort. We need to do work. We need to exercise our brains. We need to work our brains. We need to make models and frameworks and structures, which helps us put some things in perspective. But beyond a certain point, the structures themselves become a hurdle than an enabler. Whereas the knowing thing is what is akin to the truth, and which is really akin to the state of not doing anything at all. So, how I see it is the knowing about, whereas it is necessary, beyond a point, it becomes the noise. And we need to really get rid of the noise if we are to hear the very deep silence, and which is what the Jyot is, which is what Naam is, and where we can be there in just the present moment in the knowledge of the existence without doing anything. Some recent experiences from my life, just to quickly put it in perspective, of late, I've been exploring natural way of things in different ways and forms in my life, and I don't know, but some things are inspiring me to that direction. Whereas since childhood, I have not engaged a lot with nature or nature's givings in all around us. I have been fascinated by nature and love to be in nature. But then there is again the knowing about versus the knowing thing, and there is some desire to go from knowing about to knowing. And these few examples are just about that. Uh, can everyone mute? I hear a lot of background noise.
Hanji, would you kindly mute your microphone if you're not speaking? Thank you.
So I've been trying to delve a lot into natural living and including topics like natural farming, what our food is, what our diet should be, what natural living could be, how we define natural living today and natural eating, healthy eating today, to what it actually might be. And that whole journey of exploring this dimension without any expectations, without any plan, I would say, most importantly. I would say I do everything in my life and try and have some kind of a plan. But this is really the first thing that I have done without having any plan at all. And if you indulge me, I'll just take a minute to go a bit further where it started. I was always very keen and anxious to learn about what was happening with the farmers today in India, particularly in Punjab. We hear a lot about the social problems, the drug problems, and so on and so forth. So I went on a trip to Punjab to interact with the farmers and the kids and the teachers and whoever I could meet just without any plan. And why I'm emphasizing this is this lack of any plan, and this lack of having any idea of that I am doing something and I have to go somewhere and I have to achieve a certain quantum of knowledge and certain type of knowledge in a certain time really helped me come out of my comfort zone, because this is not something I had done ever before, and start getting interested in things, and truly and deeply interested. At least that is what I feel till now. I'm not sure if it is yet another fascination in subjects which were not there earlier. So here is a picture of mine in a farm digging potatoes. So this is again something which I did for the first time in my life, without anybody asking me to do this. And all this while, I thought I knew about the food I am eating. So here also in what I said, you would notice I said I knew about the food. I didn't say I knew the food I was eating, and which comes very naturally. I didn't force that into the sentence. And I just knew about what I was eating. I knew about potatoes, how they tasted. They were there in my diet, strewn into almost everything that I was eating. But I knew them only as a product, only as a produce that I could consume. I was always a consumer. So when I was a consumer, there was a arm's length distance between the two things. We were two entities, and somebody else, some farmer somewhere, whom again I didn't know was producing them, without knowing how they were being produced, where they were being produced, how they grow. I was essentially detached from the life of the potatoes, the entire life cycle of the potatoes. And what came to me was the end product, the end of life product, which came to me. And that also I didn't particularly indulge with in the raw form, converting it into a cooked form. I just consumed it as it was available, cooked by my mother or by a chef in the restaurant. So the important part here is the life was missing. Here I am with a goat at the farm. Now this is something I could have never imagined. I was always very scared of animals. I could not even come close to them, leave alone touch them. And when my wife saw this picture, she is a dog lover, and I've always kind of had this argument with her: how can you keep a dog? And when she saw this picture, she was really taken by surprise that it's not a dog, but you're holding a goat and you're cuddling with a goat. So maybe this was more about the knowing thing than the knowing about thing, where establishing a bond and a relationship and being with something or somebody was more important than dissecting that particular object or that particular thing. And which I again relate to science, because science has a lot of fundamentally it is based on human intellect. It is based on our belief about the supremacy of our mental faculties, about the human intellect. And when that comes first, we always dissect and define. We look at the parts. If we would open a biology book and let's say we look at the frog, we would talk about the arms, these are the arms, these are the legs, these are the feet. But we would never try to put the frog to form the parts, which is there. But then the knowing may not even know what the parts are, but still have an experience about the whole, which is what is important, not the part. These are a few chicks that I recently got. Again, not something that I would have never done earlier. And here, not to say that I didn't do the knowing about for them. I read about chickens and how to keep them, what do they eat, and how to protect them, what kind of dwelling should they have, how often should I leave them in the open. so on and so forth. But that was about it. And after a point in time, I just thought that I need to be with them and they could be with me. And when they were there, we were all very comfortable. My son played with them. He wanted to touch them and know them, and which was a wonderful experience in itself, which I think we could have never got by just knowing chicken through eating. That is all we used to do, or maybe reading about it somewhere. Okay, so those are a few recent examples, and that's me in a cow shed. The again, I could not really see a difference between interacting with a cow and interacting with a chick. I might be repeating myself, but whereas I hadn't interacted with any animal before, my only point of relationship was the milk I consumed, and which I started feeling was more of a product that I was consuming by way of taking it away from the baby of another mother and feeding to myself or my baby. And that's my wife. That's not something unusual. She's cuddling with the calf. And that photograph I could not take, but here when I was with the calf, that calf completely licked my arm and took it in its mouth and licked it all over, which was an amazing bonding experience. And I still feel surprised how I could do that. So, what does this say? It says that this entire experience of being with nature, being with animals, or being with plants, being with soil, playing with soil, it feels like something which was very unplanned. But I was always living in. I mean, it's a big statement that I'm making, but I was, even in a very small manner, I was living in awareness compared to how I used to be for other things that I did in my life. I'm not at all claiming that I was in 100% awareness, but in relative terms, when I got involved with the chicks, suddenly I could see them, hear them all around me. And I when I started, I said that this is something which happens with all of us at all points in time in our lives. For example, when we as a family decide that we need to buy a new car, suddenly all of us spot cars all over and different models of car 24 by 7. If there is an advertisement in the newspaper, none of us miss it. So suddenly it becomes part of our universe. Nothing changes. It was always there. I was surrounded by it, but I just didn't have the vision to see it. Or in terms of Gurbani, मेरे ते नदर नहीं सी, मेरे को लो नजर नहीं सी, which could help me see it. But then when I decided that I want to look in this direction, I could find myself in the middle of all of it. And that is what happened exactly for the case of the chicks, or when I started gardening. When I'm going on the road, on the divider, I see less of the railings and the cement, but more of the soil and the plants, and how the soil is going dry, and we could do more mulching there, and we could use more ground cover there to make it hydrated and let the soil prosper on its own. That entire thought process starts. So which is, which could be similar for other people looking at deeply at other areas. Now if we keep extending this logic, at the risk of getting logic into the play of things, because that is quite uh, self-fulfilling in itself. If we extend it, then this development of constant awareness, we can take it from one thing to another, and to the entire existence. I imagine that if we were to do that, or if that would were to happen, that would be a better way to say put it. That would that might be Naam, living in constant and infallible awareness of the entire creation. Now, here, the important thing to note is that when that process may happen, living in awareness of the entire creation, it would not be, or it may not be living in constant awareness of distinct parts of the universe, because then again it would be my intellect trying to focus on too many things at the same time. It would be a constant connection with nature as a whole, because nature is a whole, nature is one. If my connect with something is not there as a whole, it is, I believe, it is a connect which is just cultivated by my mind. And that is the real journey from outside to within. Jo Brahmande Soi Pinde. So what's the process? Very quickly, uh, we develop an interest in a subject. We are interested, we are intrigued, which is jigyasa, which is pao. Bani says, "Gaviye suniye man rakhiye pao." And it talks about the importance of birha, jis hirday mein birha nahi sotan jaan masan. That inner desire, I kind of correlate to the birha of trying to find what is happening in Punjab, that drew me to go there and go on that journey. And it may be other things for other people. Then to studying that subject, acquiring gyan, and the nagar that we talked about, man samjavan karne ka chulak padiye gyan. From studying to practicing that subject, which really I feel is what karam in Gurbani is all about. Jinko nadar karam tinkar. So when I started practicing it after acquiring that vision, then that is really my karam. Intuitive experience finally of the subject. Naam, पैरा बाजो चलना, विन हत्था करना, जीबा बाजो बोलना, इव जीवत मरना. So here I would just take a very small digression. I found it pretty interesting for myself. When we talk about gyan, and that when we develop an interest in something, we need to study it. We need to develop more gyan about it, and Shabad is a way to do that. I found that for me, gyan had two sides. One is as the knowledge of the outside versus the knowledge of the self, or if you will, the deceitful self. And I found that somewhere maybe Gurbani is very strongly pointing to not the knowledge, acquiring the knowledge of the truth, not to just that, the knowledge of the Shabad or the Pasara or the Guru or so on and so forth, but more on being aware of my own self. Uh, unless I am aware of the we talked about the noise. Unless I am aware about the noise which is there inside me, I can keep looking as much for something outside, I will not be able to hear it. So similarly, unless I if there is something in my house and my house is dark, unless I light up a lamp and show it on that inside my house, I will not be able to find it. So this gyan is more awareness about my own deceitful self, which is creating the darkness and hiding the infinite knowledge and the jyot which is already there. So my attempt is more on acquiring gyan about this phenomenon, which I need to get rid of, which I need to stop doing, stop hiding the truth, than something which I need to do. So it becomes more of an effortless thing where we are not doing versus doing. Easier said than done, but I feel that's something which we could. And in the end, I mean, it's a very short kind of a talk through what I've recently experienced. I've been very inspired by one book that I recently read, and it is about natural farming. It's written by Masanobu Fukuoka. He was a Japanese farmer. It's called The One Straw Revolution. A very quick background. His book is at first I thought it's about farming, but I don't know anything about farming. But it's all about not knowing than knowing. He talks about the human intellect and the act of doing, where we try to do in everything that we do, we want to do. And that's so tiresome. And from there, he wants to take us to the act of finding what all we need to stop doing to, let's say, improve agriculture. Today, we say that we need to do organic farming, and he says we need to stop doing these things in the chemical farming culture that we have developed, and we would be there. Natural farming exists in nature. We need to stop tilling. Nature is tilling on its own through the comprehensive root network and ground covers if we can only let them grow. We need to stop weeding. It's only we who see different plants as good sources and the others as weeds. Nature knows what the best selection is, and if at all we can grow ground cover that can let them prosper than the weeds. We need to stop irrigating. We are so hung up about water systems and dams and having elaborate irrigation networks where nature has already created a comprehensive system of irrigation. The forests are thriving in that. If only we could not disturb nature through our intellect and use that naturally existing phenomenon of irrigation, we would be, not at a dearth of water at all. So he says we are doing too much, and he rejects science as an attempt to understand and improve nature, but in parts where are where we may understand the parts to a very minuscule extent, but not the whole. While nature is perfect and unfathomable and a whole. So that's what he delves upon. And in the end, I would just want to leave you all with a few quotes from his book, which I really found very, very stimulating. And maybe you would also enjoy them in some way or the other. So here it says, he says, when it is understood that one loses joy and happiness in the attempt to possess them, the essence of natural farming will be realized. The ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfection of human beings. So here I feel that we can pretty much replace farming with life. And somewhere in his book, he also said to his some of his students and interns on his farm that if you are just trying to understand what I'm doing in farming, that then you are wasting your time. You need to understand the vision. What I'm doing in farming is just an example or an implementation of that vision. So knowing about farming is not important at all. But you are there with me if you are getting the vision that I'm talking about. But intending to understand 10 things, you actually do not understand even one. If you know 100 flowers, you do not know a single one. So somewhere the knowing and the knowing about is, people think they understand things because they become familiar with them. This is only superficial knowledge. It is the knowledge of the astronomer who knows the names of the stars, the botanist who knows the classification of the leaves and the flowers, the artist who knows the aesthetics of green and red. This is not to know nature itself. The earth and sky, green and red. Astronomer, botanist, and artist have done no more than grasp impressions and interpret them, each within the vault of his own mind. The more involved they become with the activity of the intellect, the more they set themselves apart, and the more difficult it becomes to live naturally. So let me know how we are doing on time. I think if I should, there are a few more quotes. Maybe it will take 2-3 minutes. Should I run over them or?
You can. I mean, we're almost out of time, so I don't know how much of a discussion we'll be able to have. But continue and finish your presentation.
Okay, so I'll just quickly read them and not try to talk about them much. I do not particularly like the word works. This is one I really like. Human beings are the only animals who have to work, and I think that is the most ridiculous thing in the world. Other animals make their livings by living, but people work like crazy thinking that they have to in order to stay alive. The bigger the job, the greater the challenge, the more wonderful they think it is. It would be good to give up that way of thinking and live an easy, comfortable life with plenty of free time. I think that the way animals live in the tropics, stepping outside in the morning and evening to see if there is something to eat and taking a long nap in the afternoon, must be a wonderful life. For human beings, a life of such simplicity would be possible if one worked to produce directly his daily necessities. In such a life, work is not work as people generally think of it, but simply doing what needs to be done. It would be better if people stopped even thinking about food. Similarly, it would be well if people stopped troubling themselves about discovering the true meaning of life. We can never know the answers to great spiritual questions, but it's all right not to understand. We have been born and are living on the earth to face directly the reality of living. And later in that paragraph, the world exists in such a way that if people will set aside their human will and be guided instead by nature, there is no reason to expect to starve. The reason for all the confusion is that there are two parts of human knowledge: discriminating and non discriminating. People generally believe that unmistaken recognition of the world is possible through discrimination alone. Therefore, the word nature, as it is generally spoken, denotes nature as it is perceived by the discriminating intellect. I deny the empty image of nature as created by the human intellect and clearly distinguish it from nature itself as experienced by non discriminating understanding. If we eradicate the false conception of nature, I believe the root of the world disorder will disappear. And then finally, if you expect a bright world on the other side of the tunnel, the darkness of the tunnel lasts all the longer. When you no longer want to eat something tasty, you can taste the real flavor of whatever you are eating. It is easy to lay out the simple foods of a natural diet on the dining table, but those who can truly enjoy such a feast are few. Okay, I think there's another one, the last one. The person who can most easily take up natural agriculture is the one who doesn't have any of the common adult obstructing blocks of desire, philosophy, or religion. The person who has the mind and heart of a child. One must simply know nature, real nature, not the one we think we know. Thank you so much, Ji, and sorry for not keeping well on time.
Thank you, Prapreet Singh, for a wonderful, wonderful out of the box presentation here on NAM. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. So here is what I'm going to propose, if that's okay with everybody. I think we need to reflect on this, and perhaps we start the session next week with a 15-minute give and take. Would that be okay with everybody on the line here?
Sounds good.
Okay. Ranaveji, is that good with you?
That,
All right. And
yes, that's good with me. Yes.
Anji, Chirandeep, that's good with you as well?
Sure, we have 4 minutes left.
Well, let's not rush it.
Yeah, but I want to complete the thought that I have. Is it okay?
Go
It's
ahead.
up to you. Yeah, I mean, I was really thinking about uh, what Virji shared about doing versus not doing. So, I mean, uh, given the emphasis, especially I have on doing in spiritual realm, while knowing we have we have to achieve a higher self, or we have to realize a higher self. So the focus or the doing actually becomes a burden, or rather knowing about a higher dimension becomes a burden. So how do I move from not doing thinking, especially in the spiritual realm?
So, can we take the answer next time?
Sure, BG. Just wanted to throw it out.
So, Prapreet, would you mind sharing these slides with Harvinder so that we can take another look at it? I really do want to come back to this, but not in a rushed way. I think there's some very interesting points. Deep's talked about knowing and doing and not doing. And I would also like to sort of speak a little bit about not, our problem being that we are trying to conceptualize everything. So let's kind of set aside some time next week and be able to review these slides and come back prepared with some questions.
Sure, Vijay, I'll share the
Okay.
presentation.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for joining. And by the way,